Another breaking news item is that President Joe Biden, will address the nation tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So that's going to happen tomorrow, presumably from the White House. Is that the thought process as of now?
They are saying that President Biden is expected to travel back to D.C. after being in Delaware over the weekend where he was recovering from his COVID diagnosis, that he will be traveling back today and preparing to deliver that address tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We also have another large address tomorrow, and that's from Bibi Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, who will be addressing Congress at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we are seeing many Democrats that are boycotting that address. Kamala Harris is not going to preside over the Senate as the president of the Senate, which is her official duty as vice president. For that address, she will be attending a campaign event in Indianapolis, so snubbing the prime minister there. And they are saying that she's planning on trying to meet with the prime minister later in the week, possibly Thursday. We'll see how that all pans out, if that's just maybe giving a little bit of service to the prime minister since he came all this way. But it is glaring that they are not going to be there in the room for the address to Congress.
They are snubbing Benjamin Netanyahu, and they are making a specific, really, boycott of his time in America. He said didn't send anybody to show up and greet him at the airport. These are the kind of things that normally happens for dignitaries and such that come over and do these official visits. But no, they are doing this, making a statement for Israel. That's what I'm talking about. When you're talking about a potential Harris administration. And look, we'll know, by the way, we'll know, but next week,
that's right,
who the vice presidential pick will be for her. I've given you my thoughts. I think there's a lot of rumblings. There's a lot of talk. Certainly vetting is happening right now. So we'll see who that ends up being. But I'd love to hear from you. When this record can be, again, run on this record. Her record and her statements are enough. It should be enough that if you're a supporter of the ACLJ, if you're a supporter of this broadcast, you don't need to go low on this. I'm reading X or on Instagram, and I know a lot of it's done in joking and jest, but it's so the wrong way to go personally, because you have a treasure trove of context, of content that she has provided, making statements, being the most probably pro-abortion president would be in our lifetime, being, again, snubbing Benjamin Netanyahu in their support of Israel. So you would have two very big issues here. You would have a lot of issues. You would have a great deal of concern. So my encouragement to you, if you feel like she is not the right pick, and a lot of people are going to feel like she is the right pick, is not to go low, because there's no reason to. You do that when you got nothing else to say. But when you have a vice president and someone who has been in public service for quite a long time now, there's a lot you can pick apart.
Well, that's right. And if you look at even her voting record in the Senate, organizations do voting scorecards. They take your record of votes, and based on how you voted on certain bills that have hot button issues and topics, they can kind of rate you, whereas like the furthest right in the Senate and the furthest left. And she ranked further to the left in her voting record in the Senate than Bernie Sanders. Yeah. So that's not something that you're hearing talked about by people that are going out on social media or other places, and they're really just making personal attacks, which are fair game, I guess. But is that really the right tactic if you're seeing someone running for president? Are you really going to win if that's your goal on personal attacks? That's kind of what has been criticized of many candidates before, is that you only went personal, you didn't get to the substance of it. And I think that there is plenty to look at and dig into, like you said.
A lot of candidates, you don't have as big of a record. She has a pretty strong record of where she's going to go.
Right.
And what she's going to bring into a presidency. And again, going after just the way someone speaks. And I felt that way about Biden as well. Or any of these presidents. George W. Bush. You go after, he says some funny words here and there. Well, he had a pretty strong record one way or the other, whether you agree with them or disagree with them. You could probably kind of anticipate where his presidency was going to go. But instead, you take the low road. You decide, let's just focus on the fact that he kind of stumbles over his words. And guess what happens? You had 8 years of President George W. Bush. And here's what you can have, is you go that way, and then you have 8 years of Kamala Harris. After 4 years, you have that incumbency, because she obviously has not been the president before. Now, I do have a question. It's something we should bring up. I'm not even sure the answer to this. If Joe Biden steps down this week, which, by the way, I'm not saying he will, but if I was a betting man, I think that you could have that happen. I think you have a very good chance that she becomes president before the election. I just think that's highly likely. I think that clearly there is something going on. We're not being shown everything right now. Whether you believe it's some sort of crazy conspiracy or not, I don't think it is. I think it is just it would make more sense. It would be a stronger incumbency for her to have those few months to become the president, show she can lead to a large percentage of people, as we saw the polls today, have a neck and neck with her and Donald Trump in terms of just the overall. But what we really saw was this was from a Quinnipiac poll, that there was a massive gap in terms of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in the younger demographic pack.
That's right. So the Quinnipiac poll, which was started actually the day before President Biden resigned, it was on the 19th, but a lot of people had been, and by resigned from the ticket, not from the presidency, but a lot of people had already started doing these polls if there was a possible replacement. And we see that President Trump in the overall number led Vice President Harris 49-47 with a 2.8% margin of error. So essentially a statistical tie with the edge to President Trump. But when you dig into the analytics and the details of the poll, when you look at the 18 to 34 age demographic, so the younger voters, some of these people are able to vote for the first time into, in the middle of your career, but that's kind of the youngest age demographic that they'll look at. You see that Harris is losing by 19 points in that age demographic from it's 58 to 39.
That's gigantic.
I mean, that's way outside the margin of error. That's not the voting demographic that typically you expect to break in an extreme number for a Republican candidate, but you're seeing that here in this poll. Obviously, you have to caution these polls are very early. A lot of this data was before he even announced that he was not seeking re-election.
Some of it was, though.
Some of it was because it went through the 21st, but you do have to take that with a grain of salt. But it is that's probably a very troubling number for the people in the campaign that are starting to analyze data.
And that is why I think you push her to become the president. She can serve 2 full elected terms. So you'd have 2 terms plus 6 months, is what we're being told. Here's the deal. I truthfully believe, and I know you're going to go, this is wild, because you're the people who watch and listen to this broadcast. You are not who I'm talking about. I believe there is a large percentage of that demographic, of that age demographic, that does not know who the vice president of the United States is. So the name Kamala Harris doesn't mean anything to them. The name Donald Trump does. Donald Trump, celebrity. Donald Trump, the president. Donald Trump, probably the most controversial president of our lifetime. So yes, they know the name Donald Trump, so they'll go Donald Trump. So you actually have to do so. That's why when people have said who's going to be the vice president, they keep throwing out even like a Shapiro, which, look, I could be totally wrong. I think she has to go with someone with some name value.
Right.
That people are familiar with, because you don't have the lead time to get used to the person. There's not this. I mean, J.D. Vance, I think, is one of them. J.D. Vance, most people who are running in that circle know who he is. He's had a very successful career, whether it was his book or whatever. He had brand awareness. I don't think a Shapiro does. That's why I think you're either going to go with a Pete Buttigieg or you're going to go with the astronaut Kelly, because
Kelly, right.
That is a brand name that we all know. I really think they need it, because I don't know if Harris is carrying the weight that they think. I think you'd be shocked if you went to any city in in the country, interviewing people on the street and ask them who's the vice president of the United States. There's a large percentage that are not going to know, that are not engaged in politics the way you are. So I think that poll may be reflective of that, which is brand awareness.
Goes to your point as well of if the president were to resign before the end of his term, gives Kamala Harris the ability to then be the president, and that's earned media that you can't buy if you're running for president.
Yeah. But I want to take this minute and just encourage you. We are headed towards the end of our July Life and Liberty Drive. All donations are doubled right now. You've heard what we're talking about. Look, the Biden administration has been really tough for all the issues that we hold value to. A Harris administration would likely be worse. Let's just be honest. Okay, at least Joe Biden had some moderate tendencies, even if he was being controlled by the far left. There's no need to be controlled in this administration if this was to happen, and we're going to need your support now more than ever. We only have 1 week left, and your crucial support for us to engage in these vital legal cases and in the media is right now. Go to aclj.org. Look, the news has taken over, so we're a little behind right now in our life and liberty drive. We could use you today. Do it right now. Your donations are effectively doubled. Again, aclj.org or scan the code on your screen.